Hey, it's Jen. Have you ever listened to one of the episodes and thought to yourself, oh, I wish I could leave a response to that, or I wish I could leave feedback or ask a question? Did you know there's actually a way to do that in Spotify now? I know, it's super cool. So if you head over to Spotify and search for Java with Jen podcast or Java with Jen, Hearing God's Voice for Everyday Life, you may have to search all of it. And then you go and check out my most recent episodes. There are polls and Q&A options that you can weigh in on, and I can connect with you that way over here on this platform. I usually use Instagram to connect with you guys, but now with this feature from Spotify, it's a super cool way to engage with the content of each episode and talk to me directly. I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. So go head over to my latest episodes on Spotify, and let's do that right now. It's been said that no relationship is all sunshine, but two can share one umbrella and weather the storm together. And you know, I don't think there was anything truer said about marriage. If you're married, then you know marriage is work. It is hard. I think every couple I've ever spoken to has said those words. And most couples that I've ever met have at some point come to a moment in their journey where they needed a helping hand. They needed help. And my husband and I are no exception. And the couple that I'm having on today have counseled many, many couples. And what I love about them is that they may not be psychology experts, but I have had all the resources and met with numbers of counselors and all these different things throughout my years as a pastor. And you know, this couple is just anointed and gifted for what they do. And they have some incredible wisdom and some incredible tools. Of all the resources I've ever gone to, this couple has been the most resourceful place. And thankfully, they were able to be a blessing to my husband and I and help our marriage get over the hurdles that we had. So I wanted to have them on the show. Listen up now. I do want to forewarn you, you're going to hear some environmental noise. Our cups on the coffee table, maybe the kids downstairs, pages flipping in my Bible. So just let those noises make you feel like you're right there in the room with us. So jump into this episode. They hit the 4 hot spots of marriage. We jump into the first 2 in this episode and the next 2 in our next episode. This is rich stuff. So settle in, listen up, and don't forget to share the episode with a friend. All right, let's cue that intro music. Hi, and you're listening to Java with Jen with your host, Jenna-Lee Samuel. All right, so those of you who are listening who are married or ever plan on getting married know that marriage is a wonderful thing instituted by God, but it is also the hardest thing that you can ever sign up for in life because, well, we're all humans. And so today's guests that I have are 2 people that are very, very special to my husband and I. They stepped into our lives at a time when our marriage needed some help. And so they were in town visiting, and I thought it was perfect time to pull on their wisdom and have them share with you guys from their wealth of knowledge. They have been working with couples in marriage ministry for 10 years, and they've helped dozens of couples, but probably into the hundreds now, help save their marriages and work through some of the messiest situations. And so they have some major wisdom to offer. So thank you, Andee and Pat, for coming to today's show.
Thank you for inviting us in.
Absolutely.
What a privilege. What a joy.
Absolutely. Okay, so Andee's name is short for Andrea, and then Pat.
This is Pat.
Is Pat. Are you actually a Patrick?
Yes. Well, legally I am. But that's
we go with Pat.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So anyway, so Andee and Pat, you guys are from Dallas.
Yes.
And now how did you guys get pulled into, well, actually, okay, first let me back up. Stephen and I met Andee and Pat when we were like, okay, pause, time out. We need to deal with some issues, mostly communication issues, but we needed to deal with some issues in our marriage. And so we were referred to Andee and Pat through our pastors. So we traveled up to Dallas to stay with them for a weekend.
Okay.
And it was amazing what was accomplished in a weekend. Like, these guys worked their tails off. They cleaned the house, planned the meals, cooked the meals, cleaned up the meals, did it all with a happy smile. And then literally from sunup to sundown, we were in council sessions with these guys. So I was blown away by their stamina. And so it was awesome. And so how did you two get pulled into marriage ministry itself?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
I think one of my earliest recollections of being involved in marriage ministry was when Andee and I have been married for, let me back up, we've been married for 22 years. This is both for us our second marriage. So
Okay.
I'm not proud of it, but it is what it is.
Right.
We both had some horrific first marriages. In my particular case, I was much more responsible, I think, for the demise of our marriage than you were, babe. Anyway, we got through all that. I met my wife at work, and I've always had a heart for couples because I kind of know what it feels like to be on the other end of things. I know what a divorce feels like. Just like my wife, Andee, I know what it feels like to have two kids that just get ripped out from underneath you and they get picked up and pulled over halfway across the United States with her mom and all the damage and the trauma that goes with that. So I know how that feels.
Yeah.
And I hate to see it happen with anyone else. So from a very early age of our marriage, I just knew in my heart that I don't want to ever repeat what I went through, what my wife went through. But at the same time, the scripture says in 2 Corinthians chapter 1 that we serve a God of all comfort, verse 3, and the same God that comforts us, we are to comfort others with the same comfort that we've been received. Yeah. That we've received. And I just wanted to start sharing that type of comfort, knowing that I've got a gal here that just, has been such a used instrument by the Lord to see me change. I love her so much.
Aww.
Yes, we've had our share of, how no matter what your good intentions are, and we had pastors speaking into our lives, and we knew that God called us to marriage ministry. We didn't know what that really entailed in the beginning.
That's probably a good thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we were blessed to be covered when our first 2 years. We had a honeymoon, and then we got transferred to Europe for our jobs. And there was no real church there. We did not have any kind of
support structure, infrastructure,
nothing.
Community,
and all hell broke loose, literally, what almost tore us apart.
Wow.
And so we're very familiar with all the wrong ways to communicate, all the wrong ways to be a couple, and all the wrong ways to hurt each other, or trying to manipulate into, it's all his fault.
Yeah.
Right. All the blaming game.
Yeah. So, and out of that, God birthed
redeemed
that. Yeah, and we got called into it. We did not go looking for it.
Yeah. Now, I have to really appreciate the fact that both of you guys have walked the difficult road of divorce, and look how the Lord's using your current marriage, because statistically second marriages, have even worse survival rate than first marriages. However, I feel like y'all's story is such a picture of how God can work. You know what I mean? God can step in and intervene in any mess that we offer him and make it beautiful.
That's right.
And I feel like that's what he's done with you guys as well. And so that's just awesome. And now Stephen and I, our experience, at least what I had talked with, we're in ministry, so we've been around counseling, we've done all the things, we've counseled couples, we've read all the books, we've talked to the minister, we've done all the things. And I found that in meeting with you guys, it was the most helpful and the most resourceful experience that we had. And yet neither of you are a psychology major, are you?
No.
I'm a business major and you're a marketing major. So, hello.
That's awesome. I just love it. Okay, so, but I feel like what made our time with you really impactful is that you guys listened really well, and you didn't make us feel like our perspective or our feelings were invalid. You validated our experience, and yet were able to still guide us and give us some tools that would make our experience better.
True.
And so actually some of those tools are what we're going to pull into today's episode. Okay, so we got into how you got into ministry. So now we want to address some of the top 4 issues that couples deal with. You guys have dealt with enough couples. You've seen some patterns. And so what would you say, just off the top, and we'll dig into each one, what are the 4 areas that are probably the most the biggest pain points for people that things fall underneath?
Of course, we're going to end with this, but the top one is communication. And the next is finances, there's sex, and then culture,
in-laws.
and in-laws.
Yeah.
Those things really impact a couple's lives, and you bring all your environment in. All your pain comes in, all your unforgiveness, all your issues that were never resolved come into your marriage, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
And begin to take root again.
Right.
There's a saying that says any strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness.
Yeah.
And culture can be good on its own terms. Sex can be good on its own terms, finance and so forth. But if it's done incorrectly or if it's done extremely wrong, then it literally serves to damage the marriage, not to enhance the marriage. Because all of these things that we talked about,
everybody knows.
Yeah, I mean, communication, if you have a good marriage, you've got good communication.
Yeah.
But if you have a lousy marriage, then you've got lousy communication. And so goes the train.
Yeah.
So we've learned through our mistakes that...
big ones.
Honestly, that, anything taken well can be done well. But if we take it on our own volition, and if we don't make sure that God is literally in charge of what it is that we're speaking, and if he doesn't have the authority and the right to speak into our lives to keep us humble and teachable, then you're right. It can be a damaging tool.
Yeah. I do want to mention for anyone who's listening who maybe does not subscribe to the Christian faith, that is totally okay. And I'm totally honored that you're listening. And I would invite you to continue listening through this episode. But I do want to give you the heads up that the things that we're going to address in today's episode do come from the worldview of a faith-based narrative. And so from a Christian perspective, I know that there are marriages that can make it that are not Christians. Clearly. But as a believer and experiencing how hard marriage is, I'm like, holy crap, we would not be here without Jesus. So I am really grateful.
I like the way you put that.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for that third factor there. So anyway, I just want to let you guys know that.
It's the power of the blood, which is on another podcast that she's done.
Yeah, recent. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that plug. Yes, recent episode. Okay, so now we did talk about, we'll get into these 4 things, but I do want to mention, I've been pondering
That's scary.
I know, right? I've been pondering where, even just as I've searched my own heart and searched my disappointments with marriage and realizing how much disappointment comes out of unmet expectations.
Yes.
And thinking, where did these expectations in my heart come from that made me think that it would be normal to have this blissful marriage? Because every couple I've ever talked to is like, marriage takes work. We wanted to quit. We almost destroyed our marriage. Like, we needed help.
That sounds like us.
I mean, like, every couple that I know has gone through that at some point, to varying degrees, of course. But it's like, where do those expectations come from that make us feel like we have this right to chase this idea that somehow it becomes bliss, or we shouldn't be having these troubles? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So where does that come from? Disney?
When I got married, I said to Andee, honey, our marriage is going to be different. It's going to be, I've learned from my first mistakes. I realized, there was a lot of things that I did to contribute that were not correct, and got this thing figured out. We're going to make it work. Well, that lasted about, 3 weeks? I think
Maybe.
Yeah. I think part of it, honestly, Jen, is the fact that we carry our baggage with us. We bring baggage from the old into the new. We have expectations that come maybe from our culture. We may have expectations that come from our experiences. We may have had bad modeling. We may have had a situation where I grew up in a single mom household or a single father household, and so I don't understand the other half and how that other half works. So you compensate by overextending on the other end, and then obviously when you come into a healthy relationship, to which Andee was very healthy in my mind, some of the things that I was trying to overcompensate for, she was like, what's this about? Why are you doing what you're doing, and so on. So I think part of the reasons why marriages don't work is because of those things I illustrated.
I think too, just being human. I think selfishness, pride, comfort.
Yeah.
It's what's going to be good for me, what I want. And you really don't realize that. You start that's not fair to the other person.
Because the truth of the matter is, when I married Andee, and in fact what I was saying is I want you to become not only my best friend, I want you to take care of me. I want you, if I'm sick, to give me medicine. If I don't feel good, I want you to run to the store and give me my medicine. If I'm in a bad mood, I want you to cheer me up. We don't say that directly, but at the altar,
expecting it.
That's what our expectation is. And it's very much self-centric. I want you to do for me.
Right.
In a Christian marriage,
and fix my hurts. I've got hurts, so fix them.
Yeah, because that's what you're there for.
Subconsciously, we do that.
Yeah, we don't say that out front, but then our actions speak louder than what we would otherwise not say.
Yeah.
So the reality is, I had to get to a place where I recognized that this woman is a gift to me. She's not my servant. She's not my piece of property.
Or slave.
Or my slave. But she's my equal. And her voice is just as important as my voice.
Yeah.
What she wants is as important as what I want. If anything, it's more important because as the husband, my role as a leader, as a husband, is to initiate self-sacrificial love. That's my job. My job is to serve my wife. As Christ served the church, Pat Cooper serves Andee Cooper. That's what I do. That's what's called for me, or called for me as a husband. As a biblical husband, that's what I do. When I don't do that, then the design of the marriage literally falls apart at the seams because that's not what the intention should look like. Anything other than what he wants from me. And as the initiator of the home, I set the standard in terms of what's allowed to come in the home. I'm responsible for the safety of the home. I'm responsible for the safety of my wife. I'm responsible for the finances of the home. I'm responsible to make sure there's food on the table. I mean, that's my job. Now, I receive it and I embrace it comfortably. But if I don't do what I've been expected to do, biblically speaking, there's no hope that marriage will work because it's not according to the design that we have walked into as believers.
And to interject, it can't be done as a duty.
No.
It has to, you can do all those things mentally, and practically, but if you don't have the heart of compassion, you can't do it.
Right.
And compassion, if you look up calm, it means together. So it's the passion of Christ that put him on the cross. It was his compassion that moved him to love and to heal and to come after us. That's why it's not that, he chooses us if we will just be open to him. He's there choosing us to come in. And, it's not us choosing him.
Right.
Because he came after me when I was broken.
Yeah.
In all our broken places in our marriage, if you let Christ in, he will come in. And that's why we do what we do. Because at the time that we were going through all our mess, we didn't know anything about marriage ministry. We didn't know anyone in marriage ministry. We go to our pastor, and they don't know what to do with us,
That's hard.
It's like, just pray. Well,
you
you can't just pray. You need practical wisdom and application of scriptural truths.
And I remember the phrase that we talked about the other day, babe. Jen, we had this conversation the other day in your kitchen. God knows my sin, but calls me out by my name. The enemy knows my name, but calls me out by my sin.
And the accusation.
And that's powerful because God sees my potential, not my present. He sees the man that I can become. And it's kind of funny. I don't want to do too much of a segue, but when I married her 22 years ago at the young age of 40, whatever, I spoke into existence things yet not to come. I will love you forever. I didn't know what that meant. I would take care of you forever.
You didn't know what love was.
Because within 3 months after I made that commitment, I had my first bout of cancer. And this woman here literally went over backwards to take care of me. We didn't know that at the time. And so, you can use that in any example, but the illustration still stands out. When we made a commitment initially to start this covenant of love, it's not a contract, it's a covenant. We made a commitment speaking to the future things that we haven't yet seen. Simply knowing that by God's grace, he will give us and equip us with the grace and with the strength and the wisdom that we will need then to accomplish what it is that he wants us to accomplish as a couple and for the legacy that comes behind us.
Right. Okay, so I have a question then. You mentioned something about that your role and job, according to God's design, is as the husband to lead in an example of selfless love.
Correct.
Okay, so now I have observed in raising 4 boys and having grown up with girls, there is quite a difference.
Big flash.
And
Newsflash.
I don't know if it's fair to say that I feel like the male nature tends to be a little more on the selfish side.
I would agree, knowing the guys that I know,
Okay. And I don't know if that's because they're wired to have a helper, so it's like they really love being taken care of. Like, do it for me, and they'll just let me do all the things,
Do it with me.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I don't want to label the male gender because that's not fair, because we could stereotype women as well.
Sure.
But what I have found is in dealing with couples, and I read a marriage book where I think it was written by Smalley, where he mentioned, he said of all the counseling that he's done, 97% of failed marriages, it falls on the man's shoulders. It was his fault that it was failing. And I was like, really? I was thinking about that. But you mentioned that selfishness is at the core of wise. So I'm not trying to pin bad marriages on men. That's not what I'm saying. But where did you come into the revelation? Because I don't hear a lot of men talk about that. I don't hear a lot of men say, my job is to selflessly love my wife. You know, they maybe have heard it. They maybe want to get there, but haven't really had the revelation. Most of us humans have not had that revelation. So how did you as a man get that revelation? Because that is a very separating perspective. It separates you from other husbands, you know, and the godly men I know that operate like that, you know, it sets them apart.
Do you happen to have a Bible up here somewhere?
I do. Okay,
if you can get that, I can talk to you in the meantime. Two things really strike out to me, Jen, as you're asking that question. The first one is in Philippians chapter 1, verse honey, find Philippians for me, would you, and I'll talk to you. The second thing that hit me, that really gave me a new perspective, I was with... For as long as I can remember, I've always been in accountability with other men. A lot of men don't agree with that because it's, you know, it comes across as fluffy, as soft, and nothing masculine about that. Thank you, babe. You got it? Okay. But I
had the cheater tabs for you right there.
Oh yeah, I did see the cheater tabs. But one thing that I have really enjoyed about being under accountability with other men is that I get to see other men in their environment, like they get to see me in my environment. And I get to hear their stories. I get to hear from their wives. I get to hear from their kids. And where most of my modeling came from biblical men that are not afraid to stand up for the integrity of what God has put into their lives and what God has put into their spirit, and then whether they lead and they lead well. So accountability is one thing that has kept me close to being the man that God has called me to be, because I have other men that call it out in me. The scripture says in Hebrews 4, we are to provoke one another to love and good works. And that word provoke literally means to take a stick, sharpen the edge, and stick it in the other person's side, poke it, and just kind of catch me off guard. That's wrong. You shouldn't say that to your wife. You shouldn't act like that. You shouldn't spend money like that without asking. So that's one thing that's really helped me. The other thing is this. It's in the
accountability community.
Community is just something that I just live and die on. The other one talks about Jesus and how he... See, this is funny because my Bible is marked and I know it's right there. But it's not,
right.
I know.
Where was that scripture? Where he emptied himself of all grace and he became like a man. Where is that thing? And everything that he did...
Hebrews 2:14?
No, it's not. It's in the flip. You guys ask another question. I'll find this thing. You guys keep talking. I'll find it. It's right here.
Okay, so at some point you came upon that revelation, and it's a powerful one. Okay, so what about you? Like, what was it like for you being on the other side of that? Because obviously, it's not just male versus female. Men are not the only ones that are called to lay down their life. As the body of Christ, we are still meant to reflect Christ, regardless our gender. And so how did the Lord challenge that in you of like, hey, real love lays its life down? And what was it like learning that with your husband as well and seeing him learn that?
In our situation, because really it depends on the dynamics of each couple. And in our relationship, Pat's best term was he was very aggressive and a bulldozer. I was the very soft, sweet, person that didn't know how to stand up for myself.
Sure.
So part of our healing was also learning to be assertive, but respectful.
For
me, and to understand. And that's where communication comes in, because he's trying to change and flubbing up everywhere, because that's normal in the beginning. And I would think, oh, he's doing so good, but I know it's going to happen again, and that's normal in the beginning. And you have to it's a process of coming out of your junk, So if you have an overgrown garden, it doesn't take one weeding to get rid of all the junk. You've got more weeds, and you've got roots, and you've got rocks you got to get out of there before you can even start really planting the seeds for the seeds to take place and grow. So, and basically it was learning that he was sincerely trying, even though he was flubbing up. And I have to learn to give grace and not be in judgment, not be critical, because I was so wounded. I became like him to kind of push him back. So I got critical, I got judgmental, and I had tone. So I had to come out of those things.
Sure.
You know. So, in order for us to get through the tone part, because that's what would set him off. So, you know, and he would like, roar, and his bulldozer come out and all that, you know. And I said, you don't have to do that to me. I'm not 2 years old. Just say tone.
Yeah.
And don't say it mean. Just say, did I hear tone? So when he would do that, it would like, oh, I'm sorry. It catches me.
Yeah.
You know,
because you don't always realize.
And after about, 6 months, there was no more tone. And there's hardly been tone since.
Really?
Unless I have to use it.
So it's really like, it's an exercise, it's a retraining of your thinking, it's a retraining. And really, it's probably, I would imagine, issues you're working through with him might even have been unique to this marriage as opposed to a past marriage.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And that just goes to show, you marry a human, and their personality, their lens, their all the things comes into play.
Everything.
Okay, so you found your scripture?
I did. It's in Philippians chapter 2, and it says this, do nothing, starting in verse 3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider each other better than yourself. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but to the interest of others. Your attitude should be that of Jesus Christ, who, being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, and being made in human likeness, and being formed and fashioned in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even to death of the cross. Therefore, God has exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name above every other name, that the name of Jesus, every name shall bow in heaven and on earth, and so forth. But that whole idea of doing nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, that Ephesians 4 does the same thing in terms of how we communicate, and we'll talk about that, I guess, a little bit later. But I had to recognize that when I got married, part of the mantle that I carry is a mantle to be teachable, a mantle to be selfless, a mantle, as it says here, to have no selfish ambition, a mantle that would say, I don't want any vain conceit in this marriage. In other words, there's a difference between being transparent and translucent. When I'm transparent, I can see out that window that I'm looking at on my left right here. And I can see right out there as if I can go out and touch the house next door. Translucent says, the old showers that have those big 6x6 bricks that you could see kind of through those glass bricks that you could see through. You could see a shape, but not the real thing. Well, the difference in terms of principle between having a transparent marriage and a translucent marriage is two things. When I'm transparent, my wife sees everything. She sees what's on my internet. She sees what's on my my computer, my iPad. She sees what comes in through the mail. She sees what happens with my friends. There's nothing. She sees my Facebook, everything. When I'm translucent, you don't see the full thing. You see a shadow. So when I'm translucent and I have a translucent marriage, I have secrets.
Yeah.
I don't tell her everything. I kind of hold back. I keep things. Honey, I spent $100. The reality is I had $120, but I got $20 in my pocket. She won't miss it because I'm not going to tell her about it. So how can she miss it? The other thing about being translucent,
little foxes.
The other thing about being translucent that really wrecks a marriage is that you allow half-truths to get through.
Yeah.
So in other words, honey, I love you, but I love all these other women too. But I don't tell you that. I just tell you what I want you to hear.
Right.
So the reality is,
becomes deceptive.
I keep secrets, and I become deceptive when I'm translucent.
And manipulative.
And the scripture says right here, very
like
clearly,
what our culture would call little white lies.
Yes.
Yeah, but little white lies will kill a big marriage.
Yeah.
So the scripture is very clear that I have to look at others better than myself. So as a husband, I have to make sure this girl here next to me feels safe, that she feels like she can do anything and become anything she wants to become. We heard a teaching. We're with Family Life and
for a time.
And one of the teachings that we heard when we were at a conference, a guy by the name of Crawford Loritz, he's a pastor in Louisiana, and he said, "My job is to make my wife great."
Yeah, when he said that, it was like, wow, it just went all over me because I have been squashed so much in my life, not just with Pat.
No, but just in general. And then the next thing he said is, not only is my job to make my wife great, my job is to put wings and air under those wings to give her the lift that she needs to do anything she wants to do without condition.
That's very hard.
Yeah.
Because, you really need, that's where the accountability, and that's where other people can speak, because women can use that.
Yeah.
And really destroy men, and we have seen that.
Sure.
Because Yeah, it's just the human nature.
Yeah,
Bent.
I feel like that topic in itself could be a whole episode.
Oh yes, yeah. That's when we'll stop
like
right
getting
there.
into the practicals. I know. Okay. Well, let's dig into these 4 issues then that and we're gonna let's see how our time is, because if we need to turn this into, we're at 30 minutes already.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm. I know, it's
You've
easy.
been talking a lot, Jen.
I know, we're talking too much. Okay, so what we'll do is for this episode, we'll hit these first 2 issues, which is finances and sex.
Okay.
And that way you feel like you can kind of unfold those a little bit more than if we were rushing. Okay. And then we'll do culture and how to deal with in-laws and communication, which communication is the big heavy hitter.
Huge.
Like that's
it's
huge.
Yeah.
And so we'll deal with those in part 2. So make sure you come back next week, folks.
Done.
But anyway, so let's get into finances. So what have you seen being like some of the major contenders in the financial
some of the red flags? Go ahead, sweetheart.
Well,
you want to
start? Let me maybe guide it a little bit. Okay, so you guys were telling me earlier, like every marriage, there's a saver and a spender.
Yes.
So already they're going to view things differently.
There's already conflict built in.
There's already conflict built in.
Perfect storm is already right there.
Yes. And so we encountered that when we were first married. Stephen is really and I just finally realized if we're going to have a good financial situation, he better be in charge. I like to spend the money, but I like to find a good deal,
money. Yes.
So, but I'm going to spend a little bit more liberally than him. So what have you guys found with savers and spenders? How can they avoid that conflict from the beginning in recognizing those roles?
Well, with numerous couples that we have worked with, they don't have a budget in place at all. They go, I have a file, and it's the haphazard way of trying to pay bills, or they think they have the money, realize, oops, we don't, we've already spent it. So we sit down with them and we put everything down, including tithe, offerings, whatever it is.
Man, you guys help build budgets and everything?
Yes.
You guys, these are the whole package
everything.
right here. This is the whole
We're
package.
talking credit cards, and then, and then we
it.
see what's left over in real time.
Okay.
Because we even have them save receipts for groceries, because you always think you spend less than, you know what I mean?
It's true.
To manipulate what's on the paper. And then you wonder why you're in arrears all the time. Well, you save your receipts for a month on your gas, your meals, all that. One girl was going by Starbucks, and she would go out to lunch every day.
Oh, wow.
At the end of the month, she spent between $400 and $500. And that's
just
what
on Starbucks.
Just on, and she was a single mom.
Wow.
And so we had to really
rein her in.
What
about that gentleman you work with last year? That was you were sharing the same office with him.
Oh my goodness, we won't go there. Oh my goodness, I had pieces of my Excel spreadsheet put together. He had charges being sucked out that he forgot about.
Oh yeah.
So it's just a matter of taking be aware of everything that's going out, and then sitting down and do a budget. And then along with the budget is like, okay, if you're in the red, what can we cut out? What's realistic? What do we pull back on? How can we change things? Your grocery bill doesn't have to be that high. All those different kind of things, but make it easy for their lifestyle.
Okay, so how do you, practical here, how do you do that? In that I have learned in observing and experience that people will have different things they value and feel like are worth spending
I was
money
fixing to get there.
Okay, good.
That was my next thing.
So how do you do that with couples?
With what we do is because we each are different, and we do have different wants. Like you may like to have things for the home. He wants things for tools or cars or whatever. So we have a wish list of things. We prioritize those things, and then we give it equal. If there's anything left over, if it's just $20, he gets 10, I get 10.
Oh, I see.
You see what I'm saying? Or if there's things we want to do together, like renovate the kitchen, you've got to. But that takes a lot of communication. Sometimes you need a mediator.
And compromise.
Well, and
in the beginning.
Well, and I would imagine too.
And we've
sometimes,
been mediators.
Yeah, I would imagine for some of those smaller things that you're like, I don't want to have a family meeting because I want to go spend $60 on face cream.
Let me address that. Okay.
So,
we have a thing called Mad Money.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
this works.
Every month, because we're both retired military, we get an annuity. And $150 goes to Andy, and $150 comes to me. And that's money that we can do anything with. And I normally end up in Home Depot the day after, or Lowe's. That's just where I usually stick out.
And I give mine away.
Yeah, and she gives hers away to the kids or to the grandkids or whatever.
Or people that need it.
But the beauty of that is, to your question earlier, I can spend that 150 any way I want to now. Some of that money I give to help support, different missionaries that I'm very comfortable supporting.
Mm-hmm.
But the balance of money left over, I usually either save it for something big down the road, or if I see something right now and then, I'll spend it, and I'll tell my bride, hey, look, honey, just so that you know, because it always goes back on my budget. I just spent this much money, so out of the 150 minus this and this and this that I give out for tithes and so forth, that's my choice over and beyond what we do. I guess that's more of an offering, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, this is money I spent, so that you know I'm not spending into our money, I'm spending into my money. And so I record anything that I spend on my Mad Money. I record it so I know how much of a balance I have left over.
Yeah.
So there's no guesswork. There's no, well, I think I only spent $20, so yeah, I still have 100 and whatever money left over.
And I do it the easy way.
What do you do? Well,
Because
you have you have a checking account.
Because we're at a credit union, so I just do a sub account. I have my own little checking account.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah. And so I can write checks on it.
I just never done that. I probably should just make my
easier.
It is easy.
They do the thinking for you.
Yeah.
We follow Dave Ramsey, but we do it all digitally. So instead of carrying cash everywhere, it's all digital.
Yeah.
And so Stephen will just move. Well, it used to be I had an allowance. Now I have a job, so that became my allowance. But when I had an allowance, he would just move that into my account, and I could use it.
Do what you want to.
He never cared how I spent it. It was whatever.
Exactly.
So, okay, that's great. So that's really good and practical. You need a budget, and then having Mad Money is a really great idea. And communication matters. How often do you guys sit down and touch base about the finances?
Once a week.
Oh, really?
Pretty much, yeah. Well, what we do at the head of the year is we go through all our bills to make sure that our average for our electricity and all that's what we do, is we do averages, and we build the budget for the year. And then we do our wish list, kind of like a vision thing.
Yeah.
And then once it's set, it just rolls itself. And then we're at a place now, because we budgeted like this, that our home's paid off. One of our big cars are paid off, so we were able to replace them. So it allows you freedom.
Yes, it does.
To be able to do the things you need to get done. And it gets easier.
It does get easier over
It's
time.
very hard, and so you need to look. It's not a pie in the sky, but I promise you, you till that ground, you're going to reap your results.
Yeah, because it's true. You're going to have to say no to things.
Yes.
You're going to have to say no to things you really want.
That's exactly but the funny part is that we don't say no to each other. We say, well, the budget says.
Yeah, because I used to be so mad at him because he could squeak a penny out of ketchup or something. It was ridiculous. And it's like, it's only $10.
And I said, well, the budget says we can't do it, babe.
I remember getting so creative to try to make money, sell stuff online, and
exactly.
Clip coupons. I saved a fortune on coupons.
I did save a fortune on coupons. That was nice. Okay, so on to the next topic, which would be sex. Now, I know sex can be a conversation in itself, but your guys' approach to sex is more that it is like a thermometer of the relationship, right? Or thermostat? Thermometer. And so tell me a little bit about that. What do you mean by it being the indicator of the relationship?
Sex doesn't start in the bedroom, it ends in the bedroom. It starts in the kitchen when you're doing laundry. It starts in the
doing laundry, huh?
Yeah, right. It could be the laundry room for that matter.
In Europe it is a lot.
But sex is the culmination of a relationship that has gone well all day. If Andee is having a hard time with the kids and I don't step in and help her out, but I expect her to be kind and considerate with me at night, how do you think that's going to work?
Yeah.
If I've been harsh with her with my words all day long, and I just strip her down with my emotional behavior, how do you think she's going to feel when she's naked in front of me, trying to be safe, when she has nothing to hide behind?
Right.
So
That's your corner of the bed. Stay there.
Yeah. You can sleep over there.
Yeah,
Everybody's hugged that side of the mattress before.
So sex is really a byproduct of what happens the other 95% of the day. If I'm not being sensitive to my wife, then how can I expect her to be sensitive to me when I want her to be able to meet my physical needs? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
We've met too many guys that look at sex as, you're my object, you're married to me, I want sex, give it to me.
Yeah.
That simple.
Which goes back to that selfishness
Correct.
thing. Yeah.
Correct. It's not self-serving, it's being served. Does that make sense?
It is self-serving.
It is self-serving. I'm sorry. I'm not becoming sacrificial in my serving.
Right.
I'm expecting her to serve me and my needs when I'm not considerate of her situation.
Mm-hmm.
We've met too many guys who've had affairs and think it's over. Got it. I'm sorry. Check the box. Honey, will you please forgive me? Okay, now let's have sex.
Right.
And it doesn't work because as you and I, as all of us all know, there's an emotional component to sex. There's a spiritual component to sex. And
the trust is the
there's
foundation.
a trust component to sex. Yeah, I can break. Jimmy, I want to say Jimmy Swaggart. Jimmy Evans said it so well. He says, trust is earned in drops, but lost in buckets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true.
That's so
And
true.
it's so true. So I can earn drop after drop after drop over the course of years. And in one moment, in an adulterous affair, I can lose it. And then for me to have the gall to come back to my way and say, babe, I'm sorry, I messed
It's been
up.
6 months. Can't you forgive me?
Yeah, I mean,
it takes longer than that.
And as we
sometimes.
talked earlier, to the degree that someone has been hurt is to that same degree they have to be healed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't make that determination. The person who has been hurt is the person who
Determines,
knows what it looks like and what it feels like to be healed. Now, with that said,
Yeah.
that can also be used as a manipulative tool. Get it
Right.
right there, Cooper. So Andy could manipulate me if she wanted to, which she won't. But if she wanted to, she could use that against me and say, well, you crushed me 4 years ago. So,
Right.
somewhere there's a balance.
Right.
And if it seems like it's not in the normal scope of things, that's where third-party mediation typically needs to come in and help put a perspective on where the hurt was, and
Right.
also how the healing needs to look to overcome
Yeah.
that hurt.
Yeah, because the person that is obtaining healing also has an active journey of forgiveness.
Correct.
Yes.
It's active.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's
Yeah,
definitely
they can't
not.
manipulate on that. They either, babe, you're wrong, and I'm still getting over it. And communication is important. I need to be able to say to my wife if something hurt me that bad, babe, that hurt.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm still getting over it. So I just, we'll talk about heart care and heart talk, I guess, in
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
series.
next
But,
episode.
but the reality is, I've got to be able to communicate where I have pain.
Right.
And why I'm not where I need to be right now. And
Right.
I need time and I need space.
To
So
heal.
just work with me, but know that that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I feel like two things I want to point out. One, that the person who's been hurt is the person who sets the pace.
Correct.
Yes.
At how
How they heal.
yes, at how
Yes.
much trust is now given.
Correct.
Because just like for the guys to see it from the flip side, if your wife went and spent all your money, burned up your 401k, and emptied your savings
Now you're getting
account,
personal.
and then she apologizes
Said, let's-
and wants
yeah.
full access to the accounts, you might be like,
That's
let's have a
perfect.
different
That's
plan.
a great way of
you know?
saying
Yeah.
it. I like that.
Right? And
That's
so
very
she's
good.
got to earn
Earn
that
that
trust
trust
and show
little by little.
faithfulness, right?
Yes.
Good point.
And so it's the same way sexually, because it's a trust issue. It's not a
is.
sex issue. It's
It's
a
a
trust
safety issue too.
It's
Do I feel?
safety.
Does Andy feel safe around me? Someone asked the question once, what would it look like if I were to marry someone like me, who thinks like me, who functions like me, who has perspective like I have perspective? I don't know. That would be a pretty sight.
It wouldn't be. I can tell
No,
you.
because all the blind spots would be really big.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they'll be both fighting for the same positions.
Yes, yeah.
So the reality says that if I want to have a good sex life, then what needs to happen is that I've got to make sure that before we get to that consummate relationship, that going into that relationship, my wife feels secure. She feels healthy. She feels safe. She feels like she can have friendships outside of my friendship. She feels like she can become herself without me putting a clamp on her.
Yeah.
She can feel like there's a sense of freedom that she has and that she owns because of our marriage and because of what we stand for. But
Yeah.
if she feels like she's just a piece of lumpy coal in the corner and I just pull her out when I need her, or I don't need her, I throw her back in the corner.
There's
Yeah.
no intimate
There's no- yeah.
relationship. And then we're not talking sexual.
Right.
We're talking about feelings and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
working together through things. If you don't have that and you're demanded upon, that's nothing but domination.
Yeah. And
It
the other,
is, yeah.
this just occurred to me. The other thing I heard a while ago was on a nature study. But the human race is the only species that when they make love to each other, they're eye to eye,
Oh, wow.
Face to
Yes,
face.
It's true.
Wow.
Everyone else is back to
Scientific
back.
Huh.
So another reason why sex has to be
One-on-one.
intimate is because I've got to be able to look at my wife, and know that she can look right into my soul as I'm making love to my girl, and know that there's nothing there that's translucent.
Right.
It has to be one-on-one,
Right.
personal, safe, secure, and she has to know that I am the apple of her eye, and she's the apple of my eye.
Right.
I'm a one-woman man, she's a one-man woman,
Yeah.
and that's how it needs to be.
Well, and that's how, and that the whole purpose in that is that was God's original design from the
Correct.
garden. You guys have to forgive the door. It is driving me crazy. The kids are going in and out downstairs, and it's making my door slam, but it's too noisy to leave it open. So, anyways,
Anyway, moving on.
they know I have kids, so it works out. But when God's original design in the garden, everybody was naked and unashamed. And that's God's original plan.
Hallelujah.
And
Yes.
like in the bedroom, that's exactly, we're going back to the garden,
Exactly.
supposedly.
Yes.
But I did make this point to my husband one time when we were talking about, working out our issues there. I was like, listen, for me to connect with you emotionally, it doesn't
Yes.
cost you your dignity. It might actually a little bit, but it doesn't take from you. It's still something that can nourish your soul. But when you ask for me sexually and you have not been there for me emotionally, it actually costs me something. It costs my dignity and makes me feel used. And so I was trying to make the point for him, like I want to be available to you, but if you haven't met those emotional places for me, then I can do you some favors, but after a while it's going to be detrimental to us because you're placing a demand where you don't have any equity, and you have to build it. You have to put equity there. You have to make an investment before you can make a withdrawal. And so I think it maybe helped him understand. I was like, it's not that I don't like sex. It's not like I'm trying to be withholding from you, but I was like, you have to realize you're actually taking from me. It's not just, it's more
It's hard
than,
for you to give up yourself because emotionally you're not safe.
well, and
Correct.
I feel like, because the male is the leader, I feel like it's just why it has to come from him first. Like he has to meet the need
Initiate.
that's present first, and if he's not, and again, if we have a healthy relationship ongoing, if he's been inaccessible all day, whatever, sex at the end of the night is not going to kill me. But if there's a habit or a pattern of inaccessibility, it's different. And then sex becomes detrimental because it's wounding my soul, because it feels selfish, and that's where
You feel used.
you feel used. And that's honestly where I've heard a lot of women operate from that place. And I think that's why there's kind of like this negative connotation for women, or almost a joke sometimes of like, I hide in the shower and wait till he's asleep, and like women that'll do, and it's because of men not knowing how to meet emotional needs, not knowing how to rise up and be the man that they can be, maybe because they're afraid of failing, maybe because they're selfish, maybe because of who knows what, maybe because the woman has been manipulative, and you know what I mean, not doing her place. And so anyways, but all that to say, like, sex is, it's a fruitfulness. It's a fruit of a byproduct.
Because otherwise it's just a physical thing.
Right.
And there's no emotion in it. And then you've lost the beauty of sex.
Yeah.
You've lost the joy of sex, And when we were there at that point where, because in a man, they do have a time cycle that is physical, and they have to have sex or they will go crazy.
What is that time cycle exactly?
I think when every
3 days.
Every 3 days.
that
That's kind of a
explains it,
And usually that's why you have it about 2-3 times a week, on a normal basis, is because they actually have a testosterone rise.
Right.
And a lot of women, now this is going to get a little bit, I'll keep it not so graphic, but when you're married and you wake up and you think he's had one of those dreams, and it's like, no, that's his hormonal thing. He's not anywhere else, except where he's with you.
Right.
And so because I didn't know that happened,
Right.
and most women don't, and that's why women need to talk to women. Men need to talk to men. They need to get that accountability. They need to learn how to be emotionally connecting
And
to
safe.
their wives.
Yeah.
You bring up. Oh, go ahead.
I want to say one thing about being naked, if I can. The first reference to naked
This
ever
is good.
is in Genesis chapter 2, verse 25, the last verse of chapter 2, and it says, and man and his wife were both naked and felt no shame. I think we've talked about this before when you're up at our house, but that word naked in that particular version, or that particular edition rather, of the last verse of chapter 2 of Genesis, that means transparent. So they were both transparent, and they felt they had no shame. 7 verses later in chapter 3, after the enemy has come in and after the deceit has happened, the fall has happened, again in verse 7 of chapter 3 of Genesis, it says, and the eyes of them were both open, and they realized that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. That's the second time the word naked is ever used in the Old Testament.
Is it the same word, naked?
It is not the same word.
Wow.
It means stripped by means of cunning.
Oh.
Yeah. Eye-opener.
Manipulated.
Yes.
Wow.
So the first naked is a God naked, which is a transparent naked.
Right.
The second naked is an enemy naked, or a satanic naked, which is a deceitful,
stripping.
or
Yeah.
stripping naked.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? Two
I've
verses.
I've never known that.
2 verses, 7, two words, 7 verses apart.
Mm-hmm.
Worlds of difference between the two.
Just
So
because-
and it
yeah.
goes to show you,
Yeah.
like, there's
There's an enemy that wants to keep you apart.
Clearly.
there's
Yeah.
a good sex and there's a bad sex.
That's right.
There's
It's
there's
still
a,
sex,
Yeah.
but which way are you looking at it from?
Yeah, exactly.
Verse 2,
Wow.
chapter 2 or chapter 3, if you will.
Wow, that's really
Yeah.
really insightful.
Stripped by means of cutting.
Huh.
But I want to interject with women that are working through issues with their husband, and
Yeah.
I'm talking when they're both working on it,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this department. There are going to be times going through, because you're going to go through very extreme emotions as you're healing.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to feel, I even felt hate towards my husband.
Mhm.
You know, I'm just
You
going to
did.
be very honest.
You did.
And the thought of him touching me was like so grotesque and so made me so angry. And I
And
knew
the reason why is because I was having emotional affairs. Not adulterous affairs per se, but I was having emotional affairs with some of my cohorts. And I was in total denial about the whole thing. I'm not proud about that, but that's what she's talking about here. So let's just put it out there.
And so, you know, for him to touch me would make me cringe.
Right.
But I also knew, and there was, and I know that it was God working in me, you know. But he said, "Sacrifice for me," because you know I don't know how far to the edge he was.
Right.
But if he wasn't going to be held at home, and he was already that extreme,
Yeah.
it's not going to be
Not much
Much-
further.
much-
So
yeah.
It's just
push
a
him
matter
over
of
the
you
time.
know,
edge. Yeah.
and so and that's a reality. It's not,
It
you know,
is.
so, and it wasn't a fear thing, but
And that was a laying down of your life. Right
yes,
there.
Yeah.
that
the
was a
sacrificial love.
sacrifice to
Exactly.
the Lord
Yes.
Yeah.
to fulfill my part in being a wife and loving my husband. And I tell you what, I would ask the Holy Spirit to shift my heart, to help me love him through this and help me not, you know, get sick. I mean, really,
Right.
I'm just being very honest. But there were times where the Holy Spirit and he did it every time, you know, but some to the greater degree.
Protected
the more
your heart.
Yes, and it was an enjoyable blessing. You know, but it was the Holy Spirit that did that.
Yeah.
It was more than me, because Andee in her human flesh could not do it.
Honey, if I can, real quick, talk about that situation. You were at the sink and you saw the.
Oh yeah, that was the darkest part.
Yeah, of your
I
life.
had saved money from grocery shopping to buy one-way ticket home.
Oh wow.
We were in Germany at the
We were in
time.
Germany, and
Yeah.
in Germany, there's like 6 months of darkness and dreariness and wet and cold,
Yeah,
and
gray
so
skies.
it was
Yeah.
right in the middle of all that. And I was going to leave him because I had it. You know, I didn't see any change in him, and everybody gets to that moment.
Yeah.
when
I've been
they're-
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I was washing dishes because I was going to go to a ladies' retreat.
And
that
I
was
was
my
gone
very
somewhere,
first one.
right?
You were
I
out
was in
another
there.
business trip doing who
Okay.
knows what, you know, back then. And so, anyway, I was washing that last dish and I looked out and it was so dreary and all the bushes were like black dark. And all of a sudden, my eyes hit this beautiful baby leaf. It was bright green coming out. And I heard God's voice, and he said, "Out of death I will bring life."
Wow.
And so, and then off to the monastery I went. I spent a lot of alone time with the Lord, soul searching, and it shifted me.
Yeah.
Because, and then I came back and I told Pat, I said, "I'm giving you to the Lord. Because I was exhausted.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Is what you
I
said.
cannot manipulate, control him,
No, you
help
can't.
him. I couldn't. It
Yeah.
took more than me.
And
I
it
was
scared,
give out.
and you scared the fire on me when you said that, because I thought to myself,
Because he thought he had it all made.
I can figure this gal out. I can outthink her. I can outtalk her. You know, back then I could. Nowadays it's not the same.
The Lord works.
And I thought, you know, if she releases me from not being able to have that communication with her, and she gives me liberty over to the Lord,
and I was at peace.
then I've got to account to someone
Yeah.
a whole lot higher, a whole
Yep.
lot stronger. I don't stand a chance of
Oh,
manipulating
yeah.
and so
Oh
forth.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. Wow. So help, because I know I can imagine that right now there's some listeners who, because I'll be honest, there was lines in our marriage, not sexually, but just emotionally, that were crossed
Yeah.
consistently, that I felt like when I turned to the church or even to scripture, I couldn't find where the healthy lines needed to be. I felt like I'd laid down my life so many
many
times to
Yeah.
continue
That you
to
were numb.
love through that,
Yeah.
that I was being slowly destroyed. And I was like, where are the boundaries where I can live and feel safe and yet still love like Jesus would? And it's like that fine, because at some point you just lay down your life, but I was living in that place of like,
how far do I go?
Right. And so for some women, because there are some women who are in extreme situations where the men are not allowing God to work, you know what I mean? So where do you help women draw the line between, at some point it does become unhealthy for the woman to continue to sleep with a man who is not changing,
Correct.
Or
well,
whatever.
if he's having an affair, that's going to open
another
up
story.
a whole other story. We have some friends that come out of that ministry, and they have a ministry, and usually the men have a men's group, the women have a women's group. And they have a thing called safety action plan. And if the man is willing to submit to accountability and to the men and to learn where his wounds are, it's all out of wounding, and they don't even realize it.
Because they're so wounded they can't see it.
They can't see it. They're stuck in this horrible cycle. But to break the cycle, there's some real hard line changes that have to be made for at least 90 days, and the woman and the man have to agree to it, and so they develop a safety action plan, and in that plan is if he makes a mistake, these are the actions that are going to be taken, and she's got a group of women.
Consequences.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a great ministry.
You have to.
That's a great ministry, but how does that help my average listener who maybe isn't connected to that ministry or may never be able to afford to be connected to that ministry?
It's not a problem of being affordable.
Okay,
it's a group of women that meet. They have one book that they have to purchase.
What ministry is it?
Women of Redeemed Hearts and Men of Redemption. That's out of our church back in Dallas. But they're all rooted in puredesire.org.
Puredesire.org.
And they have groups online, too, that they can join all over the country. And it helps them understand why men's brains work the way they do. The reason that in Proverbs it talks about the men and keep your eyes pure, and all that is because they're visually wired that way, and he has to rewire his brain.
It's intentional.
And when a woman understands that, it releases her in a way, release my heart
from feeling guilt and
and shame
responsibility
and all that stuff, because it's like, oh, he's wired in it, and he's messed up wired. And when he realizes that there is a way out, because a lot of men don't know how to get out of that. And there's some men that are so wired hard, they have to go to, I think it's in Colorado, and they even go deeper, into that. And they even have lie detector tests at a certain place. And full disclosure, I mean, that's a whole ministry and walk unto. I mean, but if you really want
it's a
help,
tough ministry, actually.
We have couples we've sent through there, and they have actually had beautiful restorations.
So let me ask you, at what point? And this is just a candid question because we're dealing with real life, real situations constantly. At what point do you recommend to a couple separation? Maybe not divorce, but separation because even what you're describing is a separation.
It is.
They go to different locations to work on things. And I feel like at times for us, separation would have been helpful simply to bring accountability to the baggage, and even isolation to heal and to evaluate ourselves. You know what I mean? Like that probably would have been helpful. And so what do you recommend for people with that?
When I don't think we ever have.
No.
Because if we're right there, so we're like becomes the accountability. But for if the emotional abuse is so abusive, or physical abuse, that's a grounds right there to let's take a time out. But I would not say isolate. They need to remain into accountability.
Needs to be with a plan.
It's a plan, and that's part of the safety action plan, because there comes a point where you do separate.
And there's something that we will never recommend divorce. Never. We will oftentimes recommend separation. And we've seen couples where he's been physically and or emotionally abusive with his wife, and the kids are starting to get hurt. So that's the other flip side of things. It's one thing to go after the wife. Something else to have the children tied into that whole thing, and now all of a sudden you've taken the pain point of me to another person, and you've extended it to 2 or 3 other children. Now the family's in jeopardy, not just the wife, but the family becomes in jeopardy, and we can't endorse that. We will not recommend divorce again, because we believe in the covenant and we believe in God's grace to overcome man's sin. However, in the practical world, like you brought up,
to embrace that.
We get them into separation, but then to Andee's point.
And we refer them on to counselors.
Yeah,
and
there
stuff.
needs to
Because
be accountability.
yeah.
Yeah. In other words, just don't go into another room and say, okay, for 2 weeks I'm not going to talk to you.
Right.
No, there's an action plan. You get
Yeah.
into another room. Okay, let's talk about what happened.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of your pressure points, some of your pain points.
Yeah.
What is it that you're expecting that you're not having, or that you're not receiving right now? And what is it that we can do to start talking through some of these issues so that you can be healed?
Right.
Because a lot of people think you don't have to go to your past.
Oh no, you
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we've heard
everything
this
really,
comment,
yeah. It's your first 7 years of life. You pick up so much because you're getting imprinted and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
And it becomes part of your thread of your personality on how to react to things, talk about things, think through. Your channels in your brains are being grooved, and that's a scientific fact. You know, so the reason why you keep doing the same things is because it's grooved in your brain. You know, so you have to literally re-groove it.
We call that private logic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Private logic says in the first 7 years, your character, your personality, your frame of reference, your perspective is all pretty much formed in place. Anything beyond age 7 is just an outcrop or an outgrowth of what it is that you've already become. You just become more mature in the way you see things. You become more mature in the way you perceive
Or cynical,
things.
depending which the bent is.
But so it's really critical when you train up a child in the way he shall go. Scripture says that training at a young age is absolutely critical because you're literally forming their character as you give them godly principles.
I'm thinking through my kids' first 7 years. I'm like, oh crap, God's got a job to do.
Okay, I messed that one up.
God does have a job to do.
I'm like, first 7 years, none of us know what we're doing those
Yeah.
first 7 years of childhood.
And see, that's another thing. That's why we go to churches and try to just
Being
teach
community.
mentoring.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, it's putting back into the church what was normally organic,
Yeah.
and how to women talk to women and be real, not
Yeah.
this. You know, I'm
Not a
perfect.
fluffy-
Yeah,
Yeah.
not masks are off now.
Christianese.
Yeah.
Same with the men. The men need to embrace each other and
Yeah.
help them through this.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's the sense of that community and breaking bread and having fellowship. It was about the word and how to apply it and how to become family, how to love each other.
Yeah.
The older
Yeah,
women
that's
teaching
true.
the younger women. It's not going to be overnight. This is part
Yeah.
of a process that you grow into.
I think it was a big part of that culture that's different in our culture.
Yes.
Okay, so guys, we're going to I love all this rich content, and I know these last two topics of culture and in-laws and communication, there's so much in this next one. So we're just going to wrap this one right here. And then part 2 is going to be next week, which is going to be again with Andee and Pat. And they're going to dive into how to deal with in-laws because they've seen a lot of it and they have some great tools there. And communication. And listen, the tools they gave us for communication was our major hang up. And so when they gave us these specific, just a couple of keys, it's like you just need a key to unlock your door. And the couple of keys just unlocked for us some new healing and new growth and new safety, and it was huge. And so you're definitely going to want to come back next week for that. But just in summary, for finances, you're going to have a saver and spender. You need a budget, and then you need mad money. Everybody needs the little bit of freedom to just breathe and spend how they want. And then with sex, good sex is reflective of a good relationship. If your sex life is bad, look deeper. There's something else going on, and evaluate why is there maybe a lack of trust or a lack of safety existing in our marriage, and dig into those things. And so this was good. This is really great. Okay, so come back next week, you guys, and we'll see you there.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. For those of you who've rated or shared this podcast on social media, thank you. Reading your comments and reviews always means so much to me. Listen, let's stay connected. Come follow me on Instagram at Java with Jen, where you can follow the latest and say hey. It's a really great way to stay in touch. Many of you have also asked how you can support the show. You can make donations through the Anchor app or on Patreon, or of course by sharing, rating, and reviewing on social media and iTunes as well. Thank you to each of you for your ongoing support. Your heartfelt feedback always reminds me why I do this. Until next time, remember, you've got this, and God's got you.